This is a talk about e-learning and about the electronic future, and I'm using no PowerPoint, no nothing. I'm just talking in the old-fashioned way. So I hope you'll indulge me. And I'm going to talk for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then ideally I will be quiet, and you will have questions, comments, dialogue, and I'll be happy to respond to that, facilitate it, whatever it may be. So welcome to the conference. I am personally, so I've been to a lot of conferences in my career, as many of you have as well. I'm actually really excited about this one because I think it's about the future in the ways that so many conferences are not exactly. I wanted to start by saying a couple words of thanks to Saul and Olivier and others on the team, the provost, Lisa Ostagi, and all the presenters who are going to show up over the next 3 days, and also to all of you for making time out of your schedules to attend this afternoon and to the conference. So my basic message is that Concordia has enjoyed a leadership role in some areas of online learning over the last dozen years or so, and that it's extremely important to the future of Concordia for our students, for our graduates, for the faculty, members of staff, and the whole community to stay engaged and indeed to intensify that engagement over the next while. Unless you've got your head under a rock or you've been in Florida on a too long of a holiday, you can't possibly have missed all the commentary about online learning over the last while. The most famous example is the president of Stanford, who calls it a tsunami, and he's on the West Coast, so he's always alert for tsunamis. Another person calls it a Copernican revolution, if you're thinking back to Ptolemy and Copernicus. Lots of big things happened there. But no matter where you look, New York Times, Chronicle of Higher Education, Globe and Mail, Gazette, whatever it may be, there are these apocalyptic visions of the effects of online learning, right? Tsunami, what happens in a tsunami? It's not good. Right? It's not good. And what I want to say today is I actually think that what's coming to us is good or can be good, must be done with some nuance, must be done with some caution. But academics are nothing if not cautious, to quote Iago. And I think the kind of nuance that we can bring to the ways that this technology is going to change the university environment will be quite fantastic. So there are lots of experiments going on now. And I think the experiments point to something that I would describe as a pent-up hunger for change in the academy. Most of us are working on models, whether we know it or not, that were invented in the 19th century or before. The whole model of the modern research university is a German construction from the 1800s. And although our disciplines have rapidly advanced over the last 100 years, you can't say they haven't. On the other hand, many of the elements about how we teach, how we give exams, how I stand up here and you're all rowed up there, all of that actually goes way, way, way back to the Middle Ages. And in a TED talk I gave some time ago, I actually had a PowerPoint where first I had a medieval painting of people sitting in a classroom listening to a priest/professor, and then I had a picture of students at my then current university all rowed up listening to the professor, and I flashed back and forth madly like this, back and forth, to get the point that in several hundred years, some things hadn't changed a whole lot. You may take comfort in the fact that some things haven't changed. That's one of the hallmarks of the academy, is you do try to preserve what's the best that's been known and thought. But I think there is this pent-up hunger. So some of the experiments you've heard of, Coursera being one of the primary ones, started by two people from Stanford. Unfortunately, Coursera has a kind of an elitist strand running through it. You can only join up university-wise if you're already a member of this elite club called the Association of American Universities, which is roughly 60-some-odd universities around the world that are thought to be the first world order, if you want to think of it that way. Other experiments would be Udacity is one, the Khan Academy, and edX, that partnership between MIT and Harvard, which is now expanded to include, among others, McGill and elsewhere around the world. So there's a long list I could give you. You could generate a list too by Googling, something that nobody did. Think about the verb Googling a few years ago. There's a long list of experiments happening around the globe. And I think this points to some kind of pent-up hunger for change. But the question is, what kind of change? And one of the ironies for me is that as academics, although we are charged with generating new ideas, solving problems, making new knowledge, we are a uniquely skeptical crowd about things that are new. We're nervous about things that are new. We're cautious people as a tribe. So far, many of these experiments haven't been a whole lot more than sort of, I would describe them, transfers to the screen. So instead of somebody standing in the flesh in the 3D like I'm doing right now, talking to people, you put it on a video and the video talks to you. There's more than that happening, but a lot of it is still really at a kind of early stage. And the analogy I've been using with my colleagues is to say that the car you bought in 1913 is not the car you buy in the year 2013. Cast your mind back to what cars looked like 100 years ago and what they look like today. They're recognizable. They have four wheels mostly and a steering wheel and so forth. But many of the other features, safety features, kinds of combustion, bumpers, roofs, whatever, all different. And the same is going to be true of today's experiments. So first there was the whole wave of MOOCs. Everybody's really wound up about a MOOC. You had to figure out what the heck a MOOC was. Then you wanted to know, should you have one or not? And then, if you've noticed, there's now the trend is like, oh, the MOOCs are bad and everybody drops out and it's a disaster and nobody should do them and they're not intellectually legitimate. And so now you're starting to see the kind of countervailing forces. My point is MOOCs aren't the last word in the story. They're just the first word in the story. And the car you got in 100 years ago is not the car you're going to get next year. So the experiments are going to get refined, and I think it will be fun and interesting for Concordia to be like a primary investigator in that process, not to be kind of sitting in the back of the bus while somebody else drives us along, but to actually be engaged in it ourselves. And the actual long-term effects of online learning and how it changes universities, their culture, what happens in classrooms, what happens in seminars, those effects won't be known for quite a long time. And they will be revealed to us over time in a number of ways. So one of my points today is that the online frenzy will be about more than delivery. And I think, Olivier, wherever you are, you actually said this earlier, that it's not exactly about technology, it's about the pedagogy and about enlarging what it means to go to university, what it means to get a university education or to offer one. So it's really not just about computers or my iPhone or the iPad. Those are all tools. But I think it's going to affect the structure of knowledge, and really importantly, the ways of thinking, right? So habits of thinking. It's not going to be, if you want to use another analogy, ladders, but neural networks. And you can think about it even, I find myself, I'm of a certain age, and when I'm clicking through a link and I want to get to, I want to go from, the Chronicle of Higher Education to the New York Times, two of my favorites, I still find myself clicking back through the Chronicle of Higher Education to get to the top page before I jump to the New York Times, right? Now, why do I do that? Because I'm old-fashioned, right? Because I'm not yet sort of so comfortable going horizontally from one link to the next. I still, mentally have to go back to this and then up and down the next ladder. That's going to change in the next generation. It's changing already with our students. So this technology isn't just about fancy tools. It's not about sitting in your pajamas and doing a course instead of getting up and slogging through the snow. It's not like that. It's going to change the structure of knowledge and the ways we think about ideas, and indeed the kinds of ideas we can even think. It does feel like this kind of watershed moment in higher education. So it's not just about online, but it's also about face-to-face, and it's about the how we think and the what we think and even the why we think, why we do what we do. Why do we offer the degree programs we offer? Why do we identify this discipline and that discipline? And is there somewhere in between that's a new discipline that's yet to be emerged, that's yet to come out of the fog? So as a sector, we haven't faced questions about why in a very long time. I'm not sure if we've ever really faced questions about why. And it's only in the last couple of years, it's the Occupy movement, it's the Maple Spring here in Quebec, where people are starting to say, maybe I don't need to go to university. Maybe there's this alternative model that will emerge where university credentials, a degree, a bachelor's degree, a certificate, a diploma, will no longer have the kind of currency they have today. And I think behind some of the anxiety about online learning is this worry that if we go too far down dancing with the devil in this way, it may be that the whole model collapses in on itself. I'm not nearly that pessimistic. It's a good thing, because in my job you need to be an optimist. But I don't really see collapse coming. I don't see the tsunami. I do see really substantive changes, permutations in what we've all known. And for those of us who have finished university degrees and are maybe now working at Concordia or other universities, I do think we're in for this kind of substantive transformation. But we haven't faced the question of why for a very long time. So what we're going to get, I think, are lateral, collaborative, neural networky kinds of ways of thinking about knowledge, about the questions that we ask, about data that we use, about who's in our circle of collaboration. And I think that that kind of work is going to, for the most part, slowly, but in some cases rapidly change our academic disciplines. So the academic disciplines, the classic ones, the boundaries of those are much more porous than you imagine them to be when you kind of look at them in an undergraduate course catalog or a graduate course catalog. But I think the disciplines are going to be morphing and changing. An example here at Concordia where we are national leaders and world leaders would be in synthetic biology, right? Synthetic biology is not the biology of 1950 or 1960 or 1970 or probably even 1980. And I'm not enough of a biologist to know whether it's 1990 or not. I sort of doubt it. Those kinds of changes are going to be profound, and they're going to affect not only fields like engineering and the sciences, but also the humanities, the social sciences, the fine arts, and probably even business. A lot of calls lately in business schools to rethink the curriculum, right? What do they want to put in it? Plato. Not Plato, like as in making things, but Plato with a T, right? Mr. Plato. Right? Why do they want to do that? Because it turns out that having accounting and finance and so forth, while extremely important to getting a degree in business, may not be the only kind of knowledge you need to have when you graduate from the university. I'll take my own discipline for just a moment. So I come in the field of literary studies, and I'm young enough and yet enough of a dinosaur that when I went to graduate school at the University of Virginia, it was a card catalog. So imagine like a neural network experience in the card catalog room. You ever had that? Some of you will remember. It was hideous, right? I spent like entire days of my life, which I will never get back, flipping through card catalogs, trying to cross-reference something, getting a hint, running upstairs, trying to find it on the bookshelf, not finding what I want, run back to the card catalog, cross-reference it again, only to find 6 months later, years later, that I was such an idiot, I didn't see that that cross-reference should connect to that cross-reference. And if I'd only taken this course, I would have known this and this and this connected, but I didn't know. I could do all that sitting in my office now in about 45 seconds with Google. Right? That's changed everything, and I'm not in the most progressive of disciplines. One of the ways in which this has changed things in my discipline is the field called digital humanities. Some people don't like that term now, but it's still sticking. And I'll give you a quick example. When I was in graduate school, if you wanted, my field is early modern literature, so Shakespeare and stuff like that. If you wanted to consult any book, any text written before 1700, unless it had been edited and put into a nice book that your library could afford to buy, you had to go to one of maybe a dozen research libraries around the world. You had to get a reader's card. Often you had to wear white gloves. Those of you will remember that. They would bring it to you at a hushed room in a box or whatever, and you would open it up and you would try to read it. Then came laptops where we were all madly trying to transcribe what was on these black letter print. Now I can sit in my office again, and in a nanosecond I can get any book published in English before 1700 online in a facsimile edition. I can print it out, I can take it home, I can do whatever I want, I can write all over it, whatever I want to do. What you're going to see now, I think, are kind of new I'm calling them ecosystems of connectivity happening. So an old model where the professor has all the access to the stuff, the students come to class, they have a textbook, and the professor guides the students through that maze, through that forest. Those days are already gone. And for those of you who are teaching, you only have to know that when you say a fact, whatever the fact may be, somebody's got an iPad out in the classroom and they're checking you. And they're saying, no, actually, you got it wrong, or yeah, but you missed this nuance. It's a whole new world order, and it's going to restructure authority of who's got the kind of authority to decide what is knowledge, what is true, what is fact. And it's going to change the dynamic of teaching and the dynamic of learning. And it's going to be, among other things, this kind of amazing democratization of knowledge. And I already mentioned early English books online, where I had to go to Cambridge or London or Washington or wherever it was I was going to, these research libraries, Huntington Library, to get access to this stuff that I can now get in literally 30 seconds sitting at my office here. And everyone in this room will have your own examples of the democratization of knowledge in your field, right? In your discipline. Ways in which things that one couldn't get, you can now get in a lickety-split, or you can make these neural network patterns for yourselves. And you see this also in some of the formal structures that are emerging in the granting councils, where I think Canada is now poised to require that if you get funding from public bodies like the tri-councils, it looks like we're poised to now make it a requirement that you have to publish it in open source journals where anyone can get to it, right? So the whole structure of the publishing industry that supports universities also radically changing. One of the questions I get, I go to a lot of dinner parties and a lot of cocktail parties. That's part of the job. I'm representing Concordia. I'm talking about all the great things happening here, and I'm hearing what the community at large has to say about, not only about us, but about the work we do, about our sector. And one of the questions I get all the time is, everybody's read about MOOCs, right? Any party I go to, someone will say to me, "Tell me about these MOOCs. Tell me about these Moodles. Tell me about like what's going on." It looks like a lot of excitement. What's happening? And then they will say, "Okay, so now we got these MOOCs. Do we really have to have all these buildings? Do I really need do we need a bond issue for $100 million for the new building of X or Y? Why can't we just why don't we just sell the Loyola campus and let's all be online?" Someone actually said that to me. I didn't shriek quite like that, but I did grunt, I'm pretty sure, and grimace. You can't have very much wine at these events because you could, you could get out of control defending yourself. So the answer is, of course, we still need the buildings. But what I say to people when they ask me this, do we still need all this stuff? Yes, we need it. But what's going to happen in it over time is going to change. And you think, oh, we like what's happening now. We have a lot of the success. Look at all these people in the room with degrees. They got degrees. It's all going well. Think about other industries, though. The one that I like to think of as Blockbuster. Remember Blockbuster? You probably had the same experience I had. It's Friday night. It's Saturday night. You're a little bit bored at the house. You and the partner and the kids or whatever, and you all go off to Blockbuster. Have you ever seen all of them? And then you see the whole family standing in front of the section, and they're walking up and down, and the kids want this movie, and the parents want that movie, right? Those days are like gone. Like Blockbuster was vanished, right? They were an industry that didn't need the bricks and mortar because Netflix wiped them out, right? That's what happened. I'm told that things like Best Buy. Somebody said to me the other day, Best Buy is now the retailer for Amazon, right? People run off to a store, they, not necessarily just Best Buy, but any company, run off, they look at a product, they run home and they buy it online. Right? My point about the bricks and mortar for universities is that we're not businesses in that way, and we are very much going to need the physical facilities that we have now. They're probably going to look a little bit differently, they may be organized differently. But people still fundamentally seek a face-to-face human experience in their educations. There will be some, I predict, there will be some uptake on fully online degrees, and you'll see there's certainly some reasons why you would do a lot of that or some of that. But I think that most universities are still going to find some kind of need for this face-to-face, this human link, because education is fundamentally a social activity, right? It's not fundamentally a private, secret activity where you do it all by yourself. It's mostly a social activity. That's part of the pleasure of it. But the online learning revolution is going to change what happens in our classrooms, what happens in our libraries. It's already changing. If you've noticed in Vanier and Webster libraries, both we've been consolidating books, buying compact shelving. Why? Not so we can buy more books necessarily, but because what students want today is not what they wanted when I was an undergraduate. They want group study space. They're working on collaborative projects. They're working on these neural networks that I'm talking about, and they want a place to do it. We're a downtown campus. You can't sit in Tim Hortons all afternoon. You have to have some hospitable space that the university offers to get together, right? And that's what's happening. So we need more and more of that space, and the university is for sure working on plans to try and expand the kind of space where people can get together and have the kind of human, social, intellectual experiences that we're all seeking. So my point is, the bricks and mortar are still necessary. In some disciplines, like chemistry labs, I know there are some virtual chemistry labs now online you can find, but I think all that kind of stuff is mostly, at least for our lifetimes, you're going to see it mostly staying the same. But even science labs, science buildings are now built differently than they were 25 years ago. Right? The design, the interior design, and how people interact with each other, radically different. The experience of technological change in my own life reminds me just how hard this kind of change is. And I'll give you some examples. So when I was in high school, I used a Smith Corona, like a manual typewriter. Remember those? Then I got an electric typewriter, and the really exciting thing was when I went to university, my electric typewriter had automatic erase. You know, with the little, you pushed the button and it went back and it like typed a white letter over the black letter and like wiped it out. Then when I was just finishing my undergraduate degree, a professor in my department, she had a computer. It was the first one I think I'd seen, and she had a word processing program. I'm pretty sure it was WordPerfect. And I was just mesmerized by this WordPerfect, like what you could do with this. This just seemed amazing. For somebody who was a slow and painstaking writer and always revising like a maniac, not having to retype every page again for the rest of your life seemed like an awesome idea. And then I used WordPerfect. I got really good at WordPerfect. And then somebody said to me, this WordPerfect is just not as great as Word. You got to switch to Word. And I can remember thinking like, oh my God, like I've just gotten good at this, and now they want me to do that, right? And now I can't even operate Word because it's got so many bells and whistles that I've given up. You guys feel the same way about Word? It's just like there's so many like bars and charts and stuff that I would never in a million use in my work that I find it sort of depressing. But the experience you're having here is, and you're probably experiencing it in your own lives, is the process of change and the intersection with technology. So I was thinking about this the other day. I was in my office. It was a Saturday, and I have a 13-year-old who's a young scholar who needed to do his homework. And he needed to do his homework with me, like supervising him. That is to say, keeping him under surveillance. Because if I didn't keep him under surveillance, he would surf the internet, text his friends, do who knows what. And all was going really, really well. The whole Saturday afternoon, he seemed to be sitting at this table in my office, and he was doing his work, and I was doing my work. And we got home that evening, and my partner said, young man, why don't you show us what you've done all day? Well, it turns out he hadn't done anything. Oh, I thought he'd done a lot. He was there the whole day. He had suffered for like 6 or 7 hours at my table. What had he done? He had made a YouTube video. A full-fledged YouTube video. He had posted it. It was an ironic commentary on the whole idea of having to do homework. Seriously. I didn't even know he could make a YouTube video, much less like make an ironic commentary that sort of put down everything that I was I'm the president of the university. I'm sitting in my office this Saturday afternoon, and he's making this kind of snarky video about like what a waste of time this all is. Seriously. So this whole experience from like the Smith Corona to my kid making a YouTube video just reminded me of like in a relatively short span of time relative to the long wait of history, how much change all of us, everybody in this room, everybody who's on the faculty, everybody's a grad student, everybody's an undergraduate, as a member of the staff, we're all having to learn new systems all the time, and how hard it is, how difficult it is, how distressing it can be on a kind of physiological level. I can remember when someone said, you got to switch to Word. We're not going to have WordPerfect. And I thought to myself, oh my God, like, why are they doing this to me? So it's going to change not just the how we do things, but also the what and what can be known and imagined. I'll give you a couple of examples from my teaching. When I was at the University of Guelph, I taught a first-year seminar on blogging. And the experience, I loved the course. I think the students liked the course. And I learned probably as much as they did. And one of the things I did was require them to make and keep a blog. They had to make so many blog entries every week, as well as read other people's blogs, read research on blogging, read research on how this new phenomena was going to change, kind of arts criticism, cultural criticism, politics, so forth. One of the things they discovered was that their friends were reading their blogs, and then eventually their parents were reading the blogs. This made them just very, very upset with me, because they said, it's one thing for us to like hand in some like crummy piece of work to you, and you read it in the privacy of your kitchen or whatever, and you give it a mark, whatever it may be. It's totally distressing to find out that I get home for the weekend and my mother has read my blog, and then my mother reveals that my grandmother's read my blog, and I've been saying all kinds of naughty things I shouldn't have said on my blog, and now like my whole family knows about it, and the next door neighbor and so forth. What that experience did for them was change their sense of audience. And this is a profound moment for undergraduates, right? Because the more that a student feels like they can communicate just with the professor, they may care what you think or they may not. There's a million permutations on that. But they for sure care what their parents think, most of them, about what they're doing academically. And it had a profound effect on the course, actually, a very positive effect on the course from my point of view. It was a very powerful experience of the extension of the university education. And their parents wanted to talk to them about their ideas, and they wanted to comment on their blog. Some of the parents wrote on the blogs, right? Commented back to their children. It really broadened the circle of what was going on in my classroom. I found it really heartening. I thought it was a great moment for those students. So, I'm almost to the end. I think we have an enormous amount still to learn about the online revolution, tsunami, whatever it may be. And what I hope for the Concordia community is that we will embrace this stuff without being slavish about it. So we will be, and I think we will be, thoughtful, try to be forward-leading, try to be engaged, try to be leaders in what's going on. And I would just sort of close by talking a little bit about some of the leadership we've already had. We started offering online courses about a dozen years ago, and we are way ahead of other universities, some other universities in Canada. We've also got researchers on our campus who are really interested in all the the whole domain of online. So, for example, we have a CRC, Canada Research Chair in Gaming Design, Game Studies and Design. We have a Concordia University Research Chair in Game Innovations. And the word game I'm using there twice is not an accident, because one of the things that's happening with the online learning is what people are now calling the gamification of things. And I can remember a moment when I was teaching in Texas, and a neighboring university was starting a master's degree in game design. And my colleagues at my university fell all over themselves laughing about the stupidity of this other university and what a bunch of money-grubbing charlatans they must be to be having their Senate pass this degree in game design. But the reality, of course, is much more complicated. Everybody from airline pilots, police officers, neurosurgeons, or what have you, are trained now through games. The first time you fly a commercial jetliner in the US, I can't say it's for Canada, you have paying passengers in the back seat. You may be rolling down the runway one of these days, and the person who pulls the yoke back to lift off that's their first time with a commercial jetliner. Because where have they learned to fly the jet? Now they have all their the multi-instrument rating and all that, but where have they actually flown a jet before? In the simulator. I don't know if you've ever ridden a simulator. I rode one once with one of my former students. I had to wear a seatbelt. It was 8 hours of flying and around a simulator, and you would have thought you were in the real thing. So the gamification of universities is also coming. How we will use simulations to teach social justice concepts, or the editing of literary texts, or whatever it may be. At Guelph, there was this huge project on Shakespeare and computers that tried to reach elementary school kids through games about Shakespeare. So the multidisciplinary lateral thinking stuff isn't just brand new. Many people who are historians of higher education say that kind of multidisciplinary breaking the boundaries work started with the Cold War. Because in the US at least, after Sputnik, people said, we need to pick up our game. And what picking up the game meant was that people who were in physics might talk to people who were in chemistry, who might talk to people who are in engineering, who might talk to people who are social scientists thinking about Russia, or whatever it may be. So that kind of lateral thinking or neural network approach to knowledge making is a bit old now, but it's accelerated and being changed by the technology. And we have great examples of that. TAG comes to mind here at Concordia, but I could give you lots of examples. So finally, the question for me is, what's right for Concordia as we go forward? The materials for the conference say we have about 15% of our current registrations are in online courses. That's more than 30,000 registrations a year. That's a lot. It's about 31,000 registrations this year. Individual people registered in individual courses, 31,000. Where's it all going? I was speculating with some colleagues over the winter break. We were sort of talking about what would be ideal for Concordia. I think that's a question that's very much yet to be answered for Concordia. But I'm guessing that a place like Concordia will still forever have online courses and will have face-to-face courses. I'm guessing that the bulk of them will be eventually so-called hybrid courses, right? Or blended courses, where some of it's happening electronically, some of it's still happening in 3D, real time, sitting in a seminar room or a lab or a classroom, studio, whatever. But the question is, it's out there. It's still to be answered. What is for sure true, though, is that we need to be leaders in it. We need not to be slavish about it. We need to be engaged in the digital literacy of our graduates. Students, whatever the field, journalism, doesn't matter, whatever, must have this kind of digital literacy as they leave us. And it certainly feels like everything is in play. It's kind of an exhilarating, confusing, transforming time in higher education. The answers aren't all in the back of the book. I think it's one of the more confusing times in recent memory. And depending on your personality, you may be like wishing that we're perfect, we're still here. Or you may be okay with the kind of change that's happening. It's not escapable, would be my view. So those are some comments about online learning and the future of higher education and its relationship to Concordia. I hope you have a wonderful time at the conference.